What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some news and thoughts on the Diablo 4 expansion announcement, Vessel of Hatred, which is coming late 2024. And I have to admit, the announcement of this caught me a little bit off guard, largely because Diablo is pretty much the only franchise from Activision Blizzard that I care about, and so it was pretty easy to forget that BlizzCon is happening this weekend, which of course brings with it a bunch of reveals. There was quite a few things for WoW, of course, but as mentioned, Diablo is what is important to me personally. So, with that in mind, let's talk about the announcement, and then I'll give you some thoughts and opinions on it towards the end. Vessel of Hatred is the first of what I believe is 2 planned expansions for Diablo 4, and it continues where the main story of Diablo 4 leaves off. That is to say, with Mephisto and Niriel sort of just going off on their own, though it seems we get the answer to just about how that went, as Mephisto seems to be returning to his old stomping grounds of Travancal within the Torajan jungle, which we have seen in a Diablo game previously via Act 3 of Diablo 2, and to give a little bit of a spatial reference, so to speak, if you are familiar with the current Diablo 4 map, this area of the world would be a little bit to the bottom left of Kyrgyzstan, as technically it is part of Kyrgyzstan, though it is a dense jungle area. This is where Mephisto was being held in his soul stone as part of Diablo 2 as well, so the fact that he would return here is not of great surprise, and presumably he's doing what the primeval do and spreading his hatred all around, raising up armies that we naturally have to slaughter. And I'm sure there will be a bit more specific story, but that was about all they gave us in terms of details. Now, as for gameplay features, really the only thing announced specifically for this expansion was that they are adding a never-before-seen class to the game, which comes as a little bit of a surprise because I think Paladin would have been the obvious choice, both by player request and because the area in which this will take place was originally the seat of the Zakarum, which was a religious order of sorts that had a lot of paladins, so that seems to me like it would have been an easy win. However, like I mentioned, they are bringing a class that hasn't been in any Diablo game, which means it won't be the Blood Knight from Immortal either, but to be fair, maybe Blizzard is like myself in that regard, and I don't consider Diablo Immortal a game at all, so I suppose we'll have to wait and see. So as far as the expansion, that's pretty much what there is to know, but probably worth a mention that at the same time they announced this, they also announced some changes and features coming to the base game, mostly player requested stuff. They're adding a bit of in-game content known as the Gauntlet, which will be available to max level players. There's a leaderboard coming for seasonal content as well, in addition to holiday events, might be the best way to put it. And that is pretty much the important stuff to know from this announcement. But I would like to share some thoughts and opinions here towards the end, starting with the fact that this is apparently coming out in late 2024, which, to put it very simply, is too long. I realize they're attempting to take Diablo 4 as a live service game where they do these seasons and things to fill those gaps in between, but realistically those seasons thus far, especially since they last for about 3 months each, have simply not had enough content to hold people over. So even if you are going for that live service, which isn't even something I enjoy, this clearly isn't going to be enough to hold people onto this for that long. So while I'm sure people will jump back into it for this expansion, as this is the kind of content I was hoping they would focus on, it's clearly going to take them way too long to put it out. There's also the fact that I'm not really wild about them doubling up on their business model, where they've effectively now got paid expansions coming on top of their seasonal battle pass situation, and it's clear they're just trying to saturate this with as much money as possible, which brings me to the fact that while they do technically have 2 different teams working on the seasonal content and then the expansion, I personally think those dev resources would have been better served focusing purely on the expansion to get that out as quickly as possible, but they've made it clear that they want this to be a live service, so it is what it is. That said, on the flip side of things, for people who are really invested in the story of Diablo or the lore of it, I do think this particular expansion has potential. As for starters, it focuses on Mephisto, a personal favorite of the primevals for me, as he's a little bit different than the others, and I'm a little bit curious what they could do with this area of the world with their more open world format. Act 3 of Diablo 2, which is where that also took place, was my least personal favorite act of that game, I would say, but that's mostly because of how it was laid out, as it was these sort of linear corridors as you make your way towards Travancal. the temple city that you can actually see in the trailer a little bit, or at least what looks like Travancal, I should say. But the more open world format, or semi-open world format of Diablo 4, I think would suit that location a little better and probably make it a little more fun to explore. And when it comes to Mephisto in this place, like I said, they've had a bunch of history already, as Travancal, or the dungeons beneath it, is where Mephisto was trapped for quite some time. But where the other primevals tend to be more, let's say, powerful than Mephisto, what he brought to the table, especially while he was imprisoned, was that he was much better at manipulating mortals, especially by feeding into their hatred, which is how he corrupted the entire Zakarum church, all while he was still imprisoned in a soul stone. So it should be interesting to see what he is going back there for, as presumably there is a reason, and all of that shares a lot of similarity between this and the beginning of Diablo 2, because Mephisto isn't by himself. He's essentially being carried with Niriel, a character from Diablo 4, and it would seem, just like with Aiden in Diablo 2 becoming the Dark Wanderer, she is being corrupted along this journey. And while that's certainly an interesting premise, I do worry at the same time they might, I would say, play it a little too closely to Diablo 2, because this sounds like a lot of stuff they've already done. And while yeah, nostalgia sells to a degree, I do hope they do something unexpected there, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. So to summarize, for me this announcement was a bit mixed. For starters, again, this is just so far out, at least a year from this point, but that's basically a year and a half from the initial launch of the game, and given people's general, I would say, fading interest because of how the launch of the first 2 seasons went, my hopes aren't high that this expansion breathes new life into this game in any form. So altogether, I would say this announcement and the things coming with it kind of continue a sort of running tradition with Diablo 4 and me at this point, which is that they're doing a bunch of stuff I like, but it tends to be coupled with what I would consider a lot of poor decisions at the same time, which for me makes it a bit difficult to get excited about it, especially since they've already told us that they won't really have any information to share on this until next summer rolls around, which makes this entire thing just feel a little bit odd to me. That, though, is pretty much going to do it for this video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this announcement down in the comment section below. Though for me, I don't really anticipate talking about this game again until that expansion launches, as the seasonal content and all that just doesn't interest me, especially given the wealth of RPG content coming out. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.